So our topic for today, and Brian will tell us in just a moment, but before we jump right into that, I'd like to remind any of us here, if we're not ISME members, do consider joining us. We have lots of exciting events and activities that come up for our members. Well, of course, the ISME Cafe is designed in such a way that even again, if you have friends who are not ISME members, they're all welcome to join in. So once you attend this cafe, there's another one coming up on the 20th of September. Feel free to look at our channels on social media, and you can see that pop up and invite anyone to come in. But we also have member-only initiatives that we would encourage you to be part of. Oh, there's someone whose mic's on. On that note, please could you all just check that your mics are off so we only hear who we need to hear. Thank you. I know we want to hear everyone, but anyways, so I'm going to quickly just read a couple of points for us. Each ISME Cafe meeting that we have is meant to be quite informal. So if you want to drink wine at 11 a.m. in the morning, feel free. Or if you like me can drink hot chocolate in any weather, even if it's 105 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 degrees Celsius, I love hot chocolate. You can get your hot chocolate, coffee, tea, whatever it is. It's really meant to be a space where we can chat and talk to one another and get to know each other and our work. But on that note, we'd like to tell you that this kind of a cafe, an ISME Cafe, is hosted by the Advocacy Committee in collaboration with ISME's committees, commissions, and SIGs. We have several of them. If you're not familiar, you can type www.isme.org and you'll find information about the same. And what we do is, again, as I said, the main purpose is to collaborate, to network, to share, to connect. But in doing so, we also request that even as we're aiming to cultivate a welcoming and inclusive environment, we ask that everybody is respectful of other people's opinions. If you're put in a breakout room, that we respect each other's opinion. Our aim is to accept and honor diverse perspectives. We want to cultivate a sense of belonging and trust. We want to cultivate open and honest communication and foster health and well-being of all our participants. We listen, respond, and disagree respectfully and avoid judgmental statements towards others. Well, that's it from us. This is really, as I said, time to listen in, to weigh in, to debate, to discuss, and to have fun. So I am so privileged and honored that we have today Professor Brian Kaufman, who is here. And he's going to tell us a little about himself and a little about the other panel members who are joining us today. Over to you, Brian.
Well, thank you so much, Sandra, and I'm so excited about today and glad to be here and looking forward to diving in with you all on what we'd like to be an interactive conversation with you about the current landscape of music and social change as well as future possibilities. So we're really going to be diving into a whole range of issues today and really excited. I'm actually based in Baltimore in the United States and honored to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and honored to be able to moderate this conversation with three wonderful panelists. So I'll introduce them in just a moment, but just the format for today, we're going to start out, and I've asked for each one of our panelists today to give sort of about a 5-minute or so provocation. I'm going to ask a couple of questions of all of you in just a moment before we do that. So be ready to type in the chat if you're not just yet. And the three of them will give about 5 minutes each. And then we're going to move into the middle section and have some dialogue and start interrogating some of those questions as a group. And we really do want to hear from you. And then we'll close up with just some reflection and final questions and final thoughts from our panelists. So that's the sequence of how things are going to work today. So we have with us today Geoff Baker, who some of you may know, wrote a recent book on music and social action and is engaged in this work as a researcher for many years. And is actually now working for a foundation that works with music and social action organizations. So has sort of seen this from multiple sides. We have Heloisa, who's coming to us from Brazil. And sorry, Geoff is based in the UK. Heloisa is coming to us from Brazil and has been working in higher education for many years, works to help train music educators to think about music and social change, and is also working in the community with musical and social change organizations and has done numerous research projects in this area. And then Alexandra, who is coming to us from Germany and wrote a book on music and social change, and also has worked in higher ed for many years and done research in this area for quite some time. So we have three wonderful panelists. But we'd like to start out today, before Geoff kicks us off, with just a short response from you. So in a short phrase or a sentence, we'd like to know from you, what does social change mean to you? Just a short phrase or sentence. What comes to mind when we ask that question? What does social change mean to you? I'll just sort of just get some thoughts in the room, start percolating on this. What does social change? Just a phrase or a sentence that just comes to mind. Something short. Daring to hope. I love that. Seeking justice. All right, things are starting to roll in. Collective action, democracy, empowering people, helping people overcoming unfair barriers, contributing to human thriving, peace. Everyone feels as if they belong, inclusion, a better life and a brighter future, changing systems and policies, transformative music education, taking small and smart steps that overcome barriers, cultural ecosystem changes, changing behaviors, fairer, more inclusive world. So there's a lot of themes here starting to come out that I think we're going to really be digging into today. And love if you haven't added yet to that, we'd love for you to do that. And one second question, just to get you to start thinking, in a second short phrase or sentence, what in your view is one way that music might contribute to social change? What is one way in a short phrase or sentence that you think music might contribute to social change? So Geoff Baker is going to kick us off with a 5-minute provocation, and I'll turn it over to him.
Right. Hello, everyone. I was invited to make a provocation. I think probably had quite enough provocation for one day. But anyway, so yes, it's great to be here. It's great to be here with these wonderful colleagues on this panel, and to see lots of colleagues and friends in among the participants in the. I won't say the audience because I hope you're going to get involved, and lots of new faces as well. So as Brian mentioned, I've been working on this in this area for quite a while, since 2007 actually, so nearly 20 years, and my research has taken me across Latin America, from Venezuela, studying El Sistema, to Colombia, to studying the music schools of Medellin, and into my current work for a non-profit called Agrigento, which funds small projects across Latin America and sometimes beyond. So I've, it's been quite a journey really this last nearly 20 years, and I've seen up close some of the best and also some of the worst of music education and social change. And I'm lucky enough these days to get to work with some amazing, inspiring people in this field. But also some of what I've discovered over the last few decades has been quite depressing. And I've seen how music education can promote social justice, but also how it can produce injustice or also cover it up. So I see this as a very ambiguous kind of field, with lots of potential to do good, but also to go wrong. And this experience, this first-hand experience, has led me to ask a lot of critical questions. But this critique is really aimed at positive change. So I see it as a kind of optimistic critique, really. These days, I hang on to the words of Gramsci: pessimism of the intellect optimism of the will. So one of the issues that I've had to confront is that over the last, I would say, quarter of a century, music education for social change has become a kind of dominant discourse or dominant ideology, which is somewhat paradoxical because the word social change would seem to conjure up something more to do with challenges to dominant ideologies. But this idea or this language has become fairly mainstream in the music education sector and also in the music industry and in Latin America, particularly in the political sphere. So, for example, in both Venezuela and Colombia, music education for social change is a presidential program. In other words, music education for social change has become bound up with advocacy for music education more broadly, with commercial imperatives and with the exercise of political power. So I think this is one reason why I think we need to be somewhat skeptical of claims around music education and social change, not in the sense of assuming that these claims are false, but rather of scrutinizing them carefully, because there are a lot of other agendas at play beyond those of social change. And there can be quite a lot of complexity to untangle in this field behind the inspiring slogans. Maybe the biggest challenge for me as a researcher in this field is that there's quite a lot of resistance to doing this kind of untangling work, because music education for social change, as I've said, has become a strategic discourse for various sectors. And it's one that's been quite effective. So no one's really going to thank you for shining a light into the shadows. Quite a lot of people seem to think that the role of researchers is to provide evidence to support dominant beliefs about the power of music rather than to interrogate those kinds of beliefs. And I have to say that evidence comes not just from industry and from institutions, but also in some cases from music educators and even from some researchers. There's a kind of blurring between analysis and advocacy that means that the research base for discussions about music education and social change is quite uneven. Anyway, having a serious public debate about music education and social change has proven pretty difficult because there are a lot of institutions and individuals that really don't want anyone poking away at the status quo. A couple of things I'd like to do to get the ball rolling are to put a couple of our key words here under the microscope for a second. So we're talking about music education and social change, and I'd like to just think about education. For sure, there are good reasons why one might see education as a motor of social change, but it's also well known that education can be a motor of social reproduction. And historically, I think, well, I've certainly found it much easier to find examples of music education as social control than as social change. If we look at Latin America, if we look at the history of Latin America, music education was bound up with the colonial enterprise, with the conversion and supposed civilization of indigenous populations. And if you look at Venezuela today, El Sistema is the flagship cultural program of an autocratic regime. Now, on the other hand, I think music education is generally quite conservative, and particularly in comparison to other arts education. Its practices have evolved fairly slowly over time. So I think there's reasons to think that music education and social change are not obvious bedfellows. I don't mean to suggest that they can't go together, but rather that they may be somewhat in tension, and that if we're going to look for a greater synergy between these two notions, maybe some rethinking of music education needs to happen. It may be a coincidence, but in my own work, in my own experience, I've found that some of the most inspiring examples that I've come across might not be considered music education at all. The people doing them don't necessarily consider themselves to be educators, but rather they think of what they're doing as making music together. So for me, this leaves a kind of question mark over the education part of the equation. And to look at one of our other words, change. I mean, when we're talking about music education and social change, who or what is supposed to be actually changing? I mean, society, it's a very abstract word, it's a very abstract idea. What is it? We can't really talk about changing society as such. So what are we trying to change? And in Latin America, particularly in large music programs, the answer has often been the student. So in El Sistema, for example, this aim is very explicit. There's a discourse of discipline, of correction, of reform that is omnipresent. The program insists that young people are empty, are deviant, are disorientated, and that music education is their salvation. This is quite a problematic idea, to say the least, not just because it reproduces this kind of colonial paradigm, but also because it jars with contemporary ideas about culture and development, in which this kind of deficit thinking has long been superseded. It also illustrates a kind of strand of white saviorism in this field that extends beyond El Sistema. So I think it's important to think about where change might be focused. Some other examples might be on people outside the music classroom. Or maybe it's the music itself that needs to change. Or maybe music education needs to change. Or maybe we need to change. A common principle in social change work is that change starts with us. And I've been arguing for some time that the music sector needs to put its own house in order, for example, by tackling rampant misogyny before it starts talking about changing other people. To finish, the most famous figure globally in this field is the conductor Gustavo Dudamel from Venezuela, who's made a career out of making grand statements about music education and social change. And yet the organization that he represents as musical director, El Sistema, is riven with misogyny, abuse, and other injustices. El Sistema has been a compliant and often willing handmaiden to the transition to authoritarianism in Venezuela. And yet, although these contradictions are glaring, Dudamel continues to be a global icon, including for many music educators. I think this unwillingness to face the facts just goes to show how far we still are from a serious public conversation about music education and social change. And this is why I think that spaces like this one today are so important. So that's my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Geoff. And I would like to invite Heloisa to present our second provocation here.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to be here and share a little bit what we are thinking about social change and music education. I speak from Brazil. I live in the southeast of Brazil, just geographically. It's important to understand Brazil is a big country, so I'm in the southeast. I work in a federal university, which is a public university sustained but maintained by the government. So it's free for students, and it's a very traditional university here. And I work in the faculty of music, and I teach basically music students that are becoming music teachers. So I face a huge problem. From my point of view, it is a big, huge problem. I'm going to ask some questions just as provocations, but just to set the scenery here. We have, as Geoff said very well, Brazil in Latin America, we follow more or less the same. He's mentioned about Venezuela and Colombia, but we also work with the colonialism perspective in terms of music. We still work with European models since our beginning. And then we still keep this model, this European model in our education. And then we are in Brazil with such a big and diverse society and with lots of cultural diversity. So it's quite strange when you think about all the musics, lots of different musics. We have every corner outside the walls of the faculties of music, and inside the faculties of music, we still go on with the European music. So gradually, the popular music is coming to the university, but still the way it is taught is still follow the same way as the European with the theories and all this way of making music based on old models for us. So this is really a problem from my point of view, as I said, because when these guys, when they finish the course, they are trained to become music teachers. When they go out in the world to teach music in different contexts, what they should work with, what they should teach, what they should, provoke in the students is to keep going, perpetuating the European music. How can they work with the popular music around everywhere if they're not trained to face this? So this is one problem. The second one, in Brazil, we have such a massive inequality. We have lots of poor, miserable people, and we have a small slice of population that are the rich ones, the millionaires. So this gap is so big. In the middle class, which is in the middle. And then how can we work with all the social problems? We have the racism is really high here. The Black community is big, and still have this racism as a consequence of the slavery for centuries here. We still face the slavery. I still see the Black people being treated as not normal because they are treated as inferior. So from this consequence of the slavery, we have so many other consequences. And this affects the way societies see each other as ethnic groups. So music education has to do with this. Of course it has. From my point of view, again, I think we have a role in the societies to make people more aware, more conscious about who we are, about our history, about our culture, about everything we have done before in terms of history. And I see people are very alienated, very not well aware about us in terms of culture, and then just copying American models, North American models, or European models. So the identity, the Brazilian identity, is something very serious, I think. And then music has an important role to address these memories, this DNA music that we have, and then have to wake up these possibilities of working with our music that is in our DNA. So for me, this is crucial. And then I have just to point with very focused way some questions as provocations. What kind of musicians are we producing through our specialist training, often conservatoires, faculties of music, and higher education institutions? And how does their skill set, musical, artistic, social, human, developed through the systems of music education, relate to the challenges and issues in today's world? Another one, how can we contribute to attenuating the current problems that affect us all? It feels we need a music education system that advocates for peace, respect, tolerance, for a more ecological balance, to recuperate a sense of community, of working together collaboratively and exploring our creative potential. Another one, how do students immersed in the learning and teaching approach of classical European repertoire handle their reality of poverty, violence, and racism found in so many social projects all over the country? And then the last one, can creative collaborative approaches to music making, which involve improvisation and collective composition, be part of these pedagogies? So I've been working in my researches and in my projects of outreach projects in the university and working with social projects with poor people in the favelas here around my city, which is a big city. We've been working, trying to bring the students from the university to see the work and to see how can they approach this kind of environment, the communities, and then most of all, to provoke them this a wake up, a kind of wake up, like we need to be conscious about the problems. We need to be aware about this, not just follow the model, but perpetuate, but really reinvent things and create new ways. And I believe that communities can be rescued and can be still by working creatively. I really believe in that. So my work has been based on this attempt to bridge this gap between the university and the work outside. So that's my contribution for now. Thank Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heloisa, for that provocation. And now I'd like to pass it on to Alexandra to give our last provocation before we open up for more discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. And also thank you, Geoff and Heloisa, for your great ideas. As the last one, of course, I will repeat a couple things. And please be aware, I'm a philosopher. So you might have some abstract things. Don't we all want to live in a better world, in peace, in justice, where no children are starving and where no one dies trying to reach a safe country? Certainly, we all want to live in such a world, but actually we don't. So who's supposed to work on a better world, on social change? Politicians, certainly, but aren't they most often driven by other interests than peace and justice? If politicians are not able to make the world a better place, who should? The people, certainly, as many revolutions and successful social movements have proven. But if we would look for other means to put our visions of a better world into practice, we would most likely turn to the arts. For a long time, the arts, and particularly music, have been agents for social change on which hopes for a better world have been focused when everything else has failed. The arts can empower, transform, or question. They can be a critical mirror of society's current state or a place for utopian thinking. While the arts can fulfill these functions, they are not magical and cannot substitute the work politicians are supposed to do. The assumptions that, for instance, music education could change society and help create a new and healed human being is often in danger of being utilized for ideologies, as Geoff already said, such as happened during the Third Reich in Germany and in other countries around the world, as Jeff Baker has proven in his research about El Sistema. This indicates that the relation of music education and social change is complex and ambivalent, no matter how much we would like to see the world to be a better place. In international music education research in recent years, music education for social change became an important topic. Judith Hess, Tom Regelski, David Elliott, and community musicians such as Lee Higgins argued that social change is music education's or community music's main goal. One reason for this kind of addiction to utilizing music education for social change might be today's political and social situation and the kind of hopelessness for the future it implies. But is change that easy? Do Russians and Ukrainians only need to sing a song together or to engage in participatory music making and the war is over? While this example is certainly an oversimplification, it indicates that we need more complex concepts. Just invoking the transformative power of music for social change is inadequate and dangerous, given the ambivalence of music and social change. However, criticizing music education and social change is not a popular topic, since it seems for us musicians and music educators to pull the rug out from under us, since, as Belfiore and Bennett say, quote, "A belief in the power of the arts to transform lives for the better represents something close to orthodoxy amongst advocates of the arts around the world," end of quote. I do it anyway and criticize music education for social change, but with the goal of refining music education's political and social mission, not to destroy it. For that, we need more complex theories regarding music education and social change, moving beyond a naive activist oversimplification and the exaggeration of the power music education has. Music education cannot cause social change on its own. It is no panacea or magic tool, but it can contribute to transformational processes in society which are largely political. Such a solid foundation for music education and social change needs to take into account their ambivalences. Neither social change or music education are necessarily good. They can be used for improving society or for making it worse, as music can be used for healing or torture. Social change as a transformation of relations and structures on society's different levels is also not something only positive or something we have to start. Social change is constantly happening, if we notice it or not. And it can be misused by those in power, particularly autocrats and dictators, to support their ideologies by telling, for instance, that music educators are important regarding social change and in creating a new society, as Hitler has done in Germany. This indicates that instead of blindly asking for social change, it might be good to consider first, what should be the goal of social change? What kind of society we want? And if we all agree in our visions of that society that social change should create. In my research, I developed an approach of music education as utopian theory and practice, which criticizes a simplistic approach to music education and social change, but without losing the belief in music education's transformative power, using critical utopian thinking as a method. Among others, my approach is based on British sociologist Ruth Levitas' concept of utopia as method for the imaginary reconstitution of society. This is a critical but imaginative approach. Utopia and utopian thinking are important tools for societal transformation if they are used in a critical way. They have guided societal transformations for centuries. It is about creating or identifying utopian ideas, for instance, in the arts, curricula, political programs, and to further discuss and develop them, including clarifying what kind of better society we want, and to refine our ideas and to implement them in activities in music education or society. An example could be the concept of everyday utopia, which tries at realizing an utopian idea for a certain time and trying it out for instance, by offering access to instruments such as the project Play Me, I'm Yours does by placing pianos at different places in the city or creating participatory music activities at public places combined with discussions about visions of better societies. The arts, in particular in music, are perfect for supporting utopian visions since they are utopian themselves, picturing in sounds, colors, or words other possibly better worlds or triggering in us ideas and emotions of alternatives to the current state of societies or ourselves. Understanding music education as utopian theory and practice invites us to release the imagination, as Maxine Green says, and to raise critical awareness regarding our visions of better societies, the opportunities but also challenges and limits of music education and social change, to learn from utopian visions of the past, how social change has happened, the role music can play, and to create visions of better societies guided by critical awareness. Music education has power, it can support social change, but within limits. It is our responsibility as music educators and artistic citizens to learn to use it in a critical but also imaginative and utopian way. So I look forward to our talk to further discuss some of my ideas and to learn from your ideas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for that provocation. And I wanted to take a minute before we move to our middle section, after these three wonderful provocations for all of us, just to ask all of you in the chat to just share, again, a short phrase or a sentence. What are some of the current tensions or something that jumped out at you, in music education for social change that you heard, or even that you would like to add to what the three provocations shared? What sort of jumped out at you or resonated from you from what are some of the ideas? If you could each just share one thing that jumped out at you, something you're thinking about. Maybe it's a question, but we'd love to hear from you. Artistic excellence versus community engagement. Something jumping out at you, something resonated with you, a question that came up, something you want to add. Music as a tool for social change versus music as aesthetic phenomenon. The question of music education, community music, trying to do the work of politicians. Yeah, so there's some really great thoughts coming up with it. So we're going to move to the next section. We want to sort of hear these thoughts. I know it takes a minute to sort of think about what to share, but these ideas that you're putting in can help us as we move forward in the conversation. So we have a series of key questions we're going to dig into now, and we'd like to move forward and just open this up to the panel, and also for responses in the chat. But what are some of the key structures that you think need to be leveraged and interrogated in music education through social change efforts? We've already started to dig into those, but I'm wondering if just now that we have all these ideas in the room, if there's some more things that folks would like to add. What are the key structures that need to be leveraged and interrogated in music education through social change efforts? If somebody wants to dive in. And if you want to, if you're a participant that would like to make a comment on that, please just put your hand up. But I'm going to throw it to our panelists first.
Well, if you're waiting for someone to dive in, I'll dive in.
Great.
I'm not sure about structures, but I think that, I mean, clearly I'm thinking on the bigger scale, it goes without saying that humanity faces a lot of big challenges at the moment. People talk about a polycrisis, so all these interlinked crises, ecological, social, and so on. And I think what I'm interested in at the moment is about the kind of ideological dimensions that lie behind these kinds of crises. Obviously, these crises have very material manifestations, material causes, but behind them lie various ideological formations and ways of thinking about human beings, about humanity. So I'm talking about notions like growth, like acceleration, like competition between human beings, like individualism, like separation between human beings, and also separation between human beings and the natural world, both living and non-living beings. And I think for me, if we're talking about what needs to shift in a way, I think it's these kinds of ideologies or beliefs about human nature, which are a kind of prime candidate for efforts at social change. So that would be my starting point.
Yeah.
I just would like to take some things from the chat
Mm-hmm.
about transformative, just read what Andrea Critch said, change ourselves first, so important. I believe that to work in this way towards social change, it's very hard because it needs to have a proper inner work. The person that wants to do some work in communities to really foster in social change and many layers of changes, different levels of perspectives of change. We need to be very brave to start working on ourselves. And this is hard, and this requires us lots of courage to really break out old paradigms, old statements we have already in our bones, and then look at the other, but to look at the other person, to really engage, to be able to engage. I read here something about social engagement. If we want to engage with someone else, we need to engage with ourselves first. So I believe that we need to look at ourselves, not the individualism, as Geoff said. We have these individualisms today. For me, it is a big problem, especially because of social media issues. But actually, the individualism I'm talking about now is not individualism that you are going to be egoistic. It's the opposite. It's the first thing to look at yourself, to connect with yourself, and then look at your problems, your difficulties, and everything else, to be really humble, to be able to interact with the other. So some qualities humanness, in humanity. You know, we need to remember some qualities, some virtues could be, you know, that we can look at ourselves, to work on ourselves in some level, that we can really be able to communicate to the other, to interact with the other, and then install a kind of peaceful environment for this engagement. Tolerant, patient, all these words that we know that is missing today, they are missing today in this chaos in the world. So this inner work for me is the key point to start some transformation that can lead to a bigger transformation in the community, in a proper social engagement. So just this thought.
Yeah, thank you, Heloisa. And wondering if anyone else wants to add to that thought. We do have some other questions as well. I'm wondering, Ryan, you wrote in the chat, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here. You were asking, is transformation really the best term to be using? I'm wondering if you have some thoughts about that you could share. But it's okay if you don't want to share that. But if wondering if other folks have something to add.
If I may briefly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I agree with Geoff and Heloisa, and we need to be much more aware of what music is, also be open to redefining it. You know, if there are, for instance, post-humanistic ideas, including also the nature and other ideas, this means we need to redefine our understanding of music, or we need to redefine it in relation to the social. Because music is transformative because of its relation to the social, and it can transform human beings and societies. And I think we need to question, that is, of course, again, a philosophical perspective, to question our perspectives and concepts of different things, and to see us as individuals, but also as part of communities, and also see what it costs, for instance, to be parts of communities, what we might give up, but also the benefits of communities, and what kind of music making, you know, communities could create, and where communities are transformative in a positive way and where not. And I think we really need to take a look at these ambivalences without losing hope. And as Geoff said, there is a kind of hopelessness today. And we just, you know, need to be careful that all critique does not lead, you know, in that kind of, or to that kind of point where we are not able to believe in a more positive future. Again, that's why utopian thinking is for me so important, to add that, you know, to the toolbox of thinking in music education. Thank you.
Thank you so much for adding that. And I'm seeing a comment in the chat from Andrea Creech. We can work at a very grassroots level within our own practice at affecting social change. And that leads us to another question that we wanted to sort of bring forward today, which is, what are some of the key musical practices and processes in programs and classrooms and communities that might contribute to social change if we're looking more locally? And maybe even also, Heloisa was referencing in her provocation about how we might even prepare folks leading these programs to be able to lead through that lens. So I'm wondering if anyone has thoughts on that. And I really want to open it to the room. Andrea, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. It was a really, really wonderful comment. Would feel free for anyone to bring forward some thoughts on that. Any thoughts? Music has an extremely long history of social function. Maybe we have lost sight of that in some of our music ed priorities. Yeah, how music is maybe contributing to social function. And we have another comment: social change means creating a world where poverty and disability are not barrier strengths, ensuring equal participation and dignity for all through culture and creativity. Heloisa, I wonder if you might talk too, like you referenced some of the tensions that you're experiencing out trying to bridge the gap here. Are there some promising practices that you are seeing when you're out that you might be able to share and get us to think about a little bit?
Yes, yes. Well, just to make a link with something in the chat, someone said about artistic excellence and social in community work. I do believe it's possible to work with music creatively in a way that you allow everybody involved in a group to have their own voice, to express their own musical ideas. And it depends on a good facilitation for this process to happen. But I do believe that we can make music beautifully and well done in artistically in a good way. Sometimes people here in Brazil, they relate to social projects like any kind of music is okay. It's like you can make music like if the children are making some rhythms or just singing one melody, it's fine. So I do believe that it's possible to build something really robust, solid, musically speaking and artistically speaking, even with small elements, but to give a kind of sense of uh, quality in terms of artistic quality. But what I mean is that to achieve this, and what I have experienced here is through creative work, is really working creatively to improvisations and with our music, popular music, and work with small elements to build things together. They can have the idea that they belong to that music. They belong. There's not something from outside in. It's from inside out. So this belonging, it's possible. I think there are lots of strategies, artistically, musically speaking, to create a sense of group, a community, and go for equality in a performance, for example, to culminate the product, to have the process, but really reach a moment that you can perform. And then this is amazing to empower all the voices, to empower them to feel they can make it and show this to other people, to an audience, even a small one, So this kind of work I've been trying to do here. So for me, it's a hope. It's a kind of possibility. It's a light in the end of the darkness. So I think it's possible. I'm speaking not from perspective of just dreaming about this, but I have been doing this, little by little, and in some experience they don't work. Of course, we have lots of problems, of challenges, but when it works, just a little bit that works, is some hope that, oh, we can go in this direction, that it can have good results. So it's a kind of attempt to, we have errors, we have mistakes, but it's a possibility. So for me, the key is creative music collectively, collaboratively, to empower them, to empower their voices, and to have the opportunity for all of them to show their musicality and to get the sense of belonging. So it's possible. I believe that.
Yeah, thank you, Heloisa. Yeah, and I'll just add for myself, because I'm doing a lot of work in this area as well with collaborative composition, and having that you referenced in your opening about having folks create music collectively as a group, right? Original music. And I've seen, like, I think part of what came to mind for me is about the process, right? So much of music education is focused on this thing that we're going to perform. And I think what having to create something together does is really puts a big shift on the process, or having to have these discussions and problem solve and democratically decide what are we actually going to do. We have 12 ideas in the room and we have to negotiate. and work together to make choices as a group. And we can draw on our own cultural, lived experience and different cultural backgrounds and musical interests. We can bring all that to the table when we have these discussions. So I think that it could be a very rich possibility for considering for music and social change. Yeah, we have some great additional thoughts in the chats. I'm also wondering, there's always been a tension, I think, between research and practice, right? We sort of alluded to some of those issues in our opening, but I'm wondering if we can have some additional thoughts, maybe initially from panelists, and I'd love to hear more ideas in the chats as well, if someone wants to raise their hand and unmute, about what some of those tensions are between research and practice, and especially the need Geoff referenced for those critical viewpoints and how they can benefit our work.
Maybe I could, from a philosophical perspective. Geoff got somehow lost in the waiting room. I don't know where he is. I try to admit him again. I have criticized community music for being, at least in its earlier versions, anti-intellectual and not always reflecting and being interested in defining things. And there was, of course, in that earlier phase of community music, the fear that the more we think we could destroy, the success of practice or the success of projects, that there would be kind of a flow in the practical projects to which there could thinking could be a problem or could destroy it. And that is a kind of anti-intellectualism, which I sometimes see in work with different projects. It doesn't have to be there, but it's, of course, always that kind of difference. But it also happens in classical music, in different kinds of things, that kind of split between theory and practice. Either you think too much, you destroy what you practically do, or you don't think enough and it does not work. And I think that is a foundational problem of theory and practice. But also from a philosophical perspective, I would say that our philosophies of teaching, our philosophies of different things determine actually what we do in practice. And so philosophy is very important, and to also have this idea about what is music. It's social, it's critical, all the things which our audience wrote in the chat. And these is basically our teaching philosophy or our philosophy as musicians and music educators. And I think we need to be much more aware of that and also to critically work on it. I don't think that theory and practice have to be opposites. They can really help each other, but we need to have the kind of awareness that theory needs practice and practice needs theory. Otherwise, it's not going to work in a really good way. So Geoff is back.
Yes. Thank you so much for those thoughts, Alexandra. I'm wondering, Geoff, welcome back. And we were just talking about some of the tensions and opportunities between research and practice, and also referencing back to how critical viewpoints can also benefit that work. And I'm wondering if you have anything to add from your opening provocation on that.
Yes, many apologies. My internet stopped working. I'm still not sure it's working very well, so I will keep my fingers crossed that its connection continues. Yeah, I think that my experience has been that there are certainly material limitations, like articles in closed access journals, books that are published in other countries that people can't get hold of in other languages, that kind of thing, which can disrupt the connection between research and practice. But I think the biggest thing is curiosity. In the work that I've done over the last 20 years, I've found that when people are curious and want to know more and want to think critically and self-critically, then they're very open to research. And when they don't, they're not. And I think when people are curious, these days with the internet is so powerful, we can get hold of the information that we need to by one way or another. So I think that curiosity and a kind of, I
think we've had Geoff freeze freeze here. And I just want to point to a comment in our chat from, oh, sorry, Geoff, we lost you there. And we just want to add to what Geoff was saying from a comment in the chat that was, that's actually really pointing towards theory and practice, not really thinking them so much as in opposition, but really seeing them as being something mutually beneficial that can add to one another. And I think that was also one of Alexandra's point as well. And I'm also wondering, keeping my eye on the time, what is the future of music and social change, and where do we need to go? And I'd love, even if a phrase or a sentence, you can, we have so much knowledge in the room, if you want to just respond to that idea in the chat, and I'll sort of throw that ball out. But sort of we've lobbed a lot of ideas at you today. There's been a rich conversation and so many wonderful ideas presented as well from the group. And just wondering, hearing all of this, where are you where's your head? Where are you feeling that things need to head next? Where do we need to go? What is the future of music education and social change? Even just a short phrase or just one idea, something coming up. And I'll also throw that to our panelists if there's someone that wants to respond while we're taking things in from the chat. Lisa writes, live and be the change that you want to see in the field. So I think that gets to who needs to change question. And Andrea Creech adds, we need to protect music education. Practically speaking, that requires attention to making sure that we make our relevance clear to policymakers and those in charge of purse strings. Yeah. Anything? Yeah, and I think, and I just want to add to what Andrea said, because it's a really great thought. And I'm also very aware of music and social change and sort of the tension with advocacy. There's a tension there that we were referencing before. And so how do we sort of thread those two needles, I think, is a really important question we're going to have to think about as a field. Yeah. Gabby Smith adds, we haven't still unpacked what social change even means as a field, or how social change means completely different things depending on your positionality and locality. Yeah, that's a great comment, Gabby. And greater awareness among music educators regarding their role and responsibility in driving music change. Really wonderful. Those are some fantastic comments and thoughts in the room. Heloisa or Alexandra, anything to add about that? What you're thinking about for the future and where we need to head?
Well, still, I keep coming to my first points with the process of training people in universities. I mean, at least here in Brazil, people that are going to work in different contexts in music education, they are trained in a faculty of music in the university. So still this process of changing the curricula, but not only the curricula, is the paradigm actually is to shift these old models to think in a broader way, and then create some courses that will deal with all these problems we have in the societies. So for me, this, again, the big gap between what is taught in universities and what is outside is so different. So we need to face this problem in the higher education institutions. How can we prepare these people to act? This for me is a big issue. I've been talking for this for years and years and years, but I don't see the change yet. So it's very frustrating to deal with this. Actually, in the music education program from our universities here, there's very small portion, very small part of the curriculum that dedicates to this kind of thinking, the critical thinking in this way, or to question about our social role, you know, the social, how music can act in the communities in context, different contexts. So this is not studied, it is not discussed. So this is a big problem. So students still go for a training that is not compatible with the reality outside. So for me, we need to change drastically the way our institutions are dealing with the music education systems, because they are not compatible with the reality, especially with all the technology and all the collapsing world we are facing now, all these different things happening and then affecting people. For example, the mental disorder, the mental health is a big issue. It's a big social issue, how to deal with people suffering from depression, panic attack, anxiety, all this kind of thing. They go to specialists to take medicine, to take drugs, but they don't face the problem. So there's so many problems. This is one kind of problems we have now in societies. And then how can we face this? How, you know, there are lots of problems that the university is completely blind and not addressing these issues. So we need to change this. For me, this is clear.
Yeah, thank you for that thought, Heloisa. And if I could just add from my own view and my own work, thinking about this exact issue is that, and Alexandra sort of referred to this in her provocation as well, but this is something also I think that we cannot do alone. So we really need to think structurally, if we're serious about music education and our role in social change, we aren't going to solve climate change with music alone, right? But where is our role and who are we working in concert with? And maybe if we're talking about a university, how are we working across and in collaboration with our communities to do this work in an intentional way? So I think that's something we really need to think about as well. So I'm wondering at this point, if any of you have some lingering questions we didn't get to.
May I also, Brian, could I briefly
I'm going to
let Heloisa, because I agree with her, and we have some comments from my colleague Axel Petri Breis from Vienna. And I think especially at universities of music, or Musikhochschulen, we call it in Germany, we still have the focus of music for its own sake. And it's difficult to get into the understanding that music is also social. But I have argued in my research that we need to accept both. You know, music can be for its own sake, and in our Northern European tradition of Bildung and of aesthetic experience, that has, of course, you know, a certain value, but it cannot be the only thing. So we need also, you know, the other side. Music is social. We cannot get out of it. Music is transformative. No matter, you know, what we want, it transforms just on itself. And in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, you know, there have now been developments also in higher education which give hope. We have now community music, and Alicia De Banfi is also here, who's an important figure in community music in Germany. You know, community music becomes more important in Germany, raising awareness for this kind of transformative aspects. Or Axel Petri Breis, you know, working on music mediation, Musikvermittlung. Also raising awareness for social, you know, aspects. They recently published a book, Turning Social, about music mediation, which is particularly connected, you know, to universities of music, where we need that, the conservatory, all these places where we have formerly only been focused on music for its own sake. But, you know, I still would say we cannot give up, you know, that tradition, music for its own sake. But we need both, and we need to equip our students and graduates with the abilities to choose, you know, when have they a focus on the transformative power of music, Or when is it simply in a concert hall? Or how can you also connect this? Artistic citizenship, for instance, is a concept which can be useful, which can be used in different educational programs at universities and things like that. And I think it's very important that also we would take a look at the different parts of the world where we have different traditions of education, of music, of training and conservatories. So I think both is important, but at least, for the German-speaking part of the world, I see hope also with the two colleagues who are here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. And at this time, I'd like to just ask all of our participants if there are any lingering questions, things that we didn't address today, or even just questions on your mind that we can pause. That we have just about 10 minutes left. And so if you could put any questions you have in the chat, and while you're thinking about that and sharing any of those questions you may still have, I want to ask each of our panelists just to share a final thought, just 1 to 2 minutes. How, in your view, can music contribute to social change? What do we need to lean into and watch out for? So how can music contribute to social change, and what do we need to lean into and watch out for? So what comes
I just want to say shortly, for me, is the possibility of recuperating the sense of community. I think we've reached a point in the society that the individualism is very sick, is kind of getting people in a state of separated, in separation. So we need to recuperate this sense of community. Music is part of community, it's part of, life in community. So we need to recuperate this, not for a competition, because it's led to some competition depending on the context, but to have fun, to have joy, to have good feelings of being together and working together and producing music. So it's so powerful if we can recuperate this sense. And this has other consequences that are all beneficial. It's good for your health. it's just to become joyful again, and then like a child, more pure and more, perhaps I'm saying something naive, I don't know, but I believe that it's possible, it's part of our humanity. So, and then this can address all the questions like how to tolerate each other, how to be more humble, how to love more each other. I think we need love. We need this, and music and community is quite powerful for that. So that's my big thought now.
Thank you so much, Heloisa. Alexandra or Geoff, how can music contribute to social change? What do we need to lean into and watch out for? A final thought for the room. Go ahead, Alexandra. Oh, Geoff.
I'll try one last time. So I think I very much agree with Heloisa. I think that the power of music, the power to create that this always happens when we make music, but so to really lean into that and to center that in music making in a really intentional way. And I think what to be aware of is our simplistic notions, as Alexandra has talked about. And there's a very interesting author about social change I've been reading recently called Vanessa Machado de Oliveira, Brazilian author, who talks about self-infantilizing behaviors. In other words, a kind of tendency to grasp for easy answers, for comforting answers, for easy solutions. And I think this is something we have to be aware of when we're talking and thinking about social change, is not falling for simplistic notions and quick fixes, simple solutions to complex problems, but really digging deep. And in the case of this specific field, I think we need to be very aware of or beware of ignoring or censoring research that asks difficult questions. There's no route to real social change that goes through ignoring or censoring research.
Thank you, Geoff, for that very important thought. And Alexandra, love to hear from you as well.
Yes, I agree with Geoff and Heloisa. Of course, music is always transformative. And during the last 2 or 3 years, there has been an impact, or, there has been a new interest in the utopian dimensions of music and music education. Dave Cameron, for instance, wrote a book about civic imagination and community music and music making, which raises again this idea of utopian thinking, the utopian power of the arts. And it was important for me in my research to also emphasize that, but also that we need critical dimensions, that we need to know where our power as musicians ends actually, and where we need political means, where we need social movements, where we need different kinds of things which have been transformative, which also used music, in the past. And of course, transformation always starts with ourselves and with different kinds of things. And many people who are here today have done wonderful work, in trying to change society. And music education can, of course, be, a way of doing that, of transforming individuals, of transforming societies. But I would also say we should not exaggerate, the power it has, because at least in Germany, we have high percentages of burnout regarding music teachers and in music education. And it's a little bit too much, from music educators who are already busy with everything, also additionally to say, and you need to change the world. That's quite a lot. So I think, of course, we need change. Of course, we need to do that, but also within limits, and not to burden music educators, in a way which goes beyond what they already do. But it is part of our work, and we need to emphasize that transformation, social transformation, is certainly, in terms of artistic citizenship or different things, part of our work. But, we cannot do that kind of social change on our own. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for a fabulous panel. We do have one additional comment, question in the chat from Andrea Creech, and we'll open that to the panel to discuss. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here today, and just wanted to encourage everyone. If whether you're an ISME member or not yet an ISME member, we do have a conference coming up next year in Montreal in the summer, and applications for proposals coming up at the end of this month. I think it's September 30th. So I hope today got you thinking a little bit about this area and some of the big questions and issues and challenges ahead and right now. And we would really invite you to consider submitting something for the SIG to be part of these conversations continuing forward in Montreal. And Andrea's question is a wonderful one for us to close out with today. And she asked, her lingering question is something around the ways in which the discourses around music's role in social change can be leveraged in communicating our relevance. So I'm just wondering if we have even one panelist that wants to weigh in a little bit on that big question from Andrea. It's a tough one.
No one else is going to say. I mean, I think that really is a huge dilemma, because it seems to me that that's a really tough question, because one can certainly see the motivation or the rationale behind making quite expansive statements in order to defend the discipline, but one can also see how those very same statements feed back in some quite problematic ways into the very work that people are trying to do. In terms, we've already discussed a lot about in terms of raising expectations, raising demands, and in a sense complicating the work of finding out what really does work well. The sort of critical thinking that's so important for refining this work. So I'm afraid I don't have an answer to that. I think it is a really crucial question, and I'd love to know how one can balance these two, imperatives, which do seem to be conflicting to me.
Thank you for that final thought, Geoff. And can you please join me in just thanking this group of panelists who have led us in this conversation today? Thank you so much. Really appreciate all of you, and thank you so much for the participants for your wonderful ideas and thoughts throughout this session. We've really appreciated it and hope to continue and have other ISME cafes in the future. So stay tuned on that, consider a proposal, and we're so delighted that you joined us today. 12:29, we are going to end on time. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.